The following is a live presentation of the Commercial Appeal. Take the CA wherever you go. Download the Commercial Appeal app on your smartphone or tablet and get push alerts when breaking news happens. It's a free download for your iPhone and iPad in the Apple App Store and in the Google Play Store for your Android device. This is the Grizzlies Podcast with Grizzlies beat reporter Ron Tillery, columnist Jeff Calkins, and Pick and Pop columnist Chris Herrington.
Well, it's hump day, and this is the first of many Grizzlies podcasts that you will be enjoying for the 2016-17 season. I am Ron Tillery, the only beat writer the Memphis Grizzlies have ever known, joined by our Pick and Pop columnist, Chris Herrington, and our numbers game contributor, Peter Edmiston. So welcome, and, you know, let's start big, as in Big Spain, because I think as the Grizzlies get prepared to start training camp, there's nothing more important than the fact that Marc Gasol is prepared to return.
I mean, it's funny because you have a new coach, you have the biggest free agent signing in franchise history, you have the highest draft pick in a long time, and that is by far the biggest story is Marc Gasol, to the point that, you know, luckily we have a month before we have to make any predictions, but whether I predict the Grizzlies to be a top 3 or 4 seed or I predict him to miss the playoffs depends almost entirely on what Marc Gasol looks like in the preseason. Yeah,
I mean, him returning to form is huge. And Peter, you've written a lot about this and you've investigated that injury. And I just feel like there's a lot of reason to be optimistic about his situation, given that they were cautious. And he just seems to be on pace, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, no, I think that everything has been really good so far. Everything that they would have wanted has happened more or less the way that it's been handled. Yeah, he didn't play for Spain in the Rio Olympics despite a little bit of pressure and maybe some desire. I mean, I'm sure quite a bit of desire to do it. He decided not to simply because, you know, he wanted to be judicious about his health and not try to rush anything. He has always consistently said he's been on or ahead of pace. Marc is a diligent worker and, you know, probably too much of a worker in this case because you have to, you know, be very patient with the process and go step by step, not try to rush ahead. The thing I would say, though, is that we're in very much uncharted waters, even assuming that the rehab all goes according to plan. We just, given his age, you know, he's 31, he'll be 32 at some point this year. You have a history, particularly with big men and people over the age of 30 with this injury that is not good. So if he were to come back and be 90% or more of what he was, that would be pretty much unprecedented. I'm not saying that it won't happen because it very well could, and he's a unique guy, and they have reason to think this was an injury that was a little more conducive to healing than others. So maybe so, but you just have to say the history hasn't been good. So it's very much a wait and see just to make sure that everything's okay.
Well, he's a very expressive player, a very expressive person, not only on the floor, but in social media to a degree. Like either he will be very expressive or he will sort of disappear.
Well, he had that whole Jack Nicholson thing.
He tweeted, "I'm back."
His personal optimism and excitement is coming through.
No doubt.
And I mean, I haven't seen him on the floor yet, but he seems to feel like he's on pace and he feels in good shape, and that's a good sign. But to your point, you can feel good, but then when actual NBA games start, that doesn't mean the performance is going to be at where you think it should be. And the other thing is, even if he is all the way back, it doesn't mean it'll stay that way. You know, I mean, I think they have to be, even if he comes back and he looks like the old Marc Gasol, they have to exercise more caution with him than they have in the past.
This was a point, actually, that I had talked to a couple of people that dealt with this before at a high level, and they said the same thing, that you have to restrict minutes, even when it looks great, even when everything looks fantastic. Let's say he's playing 20 solid minutes, 25 solid minutes, maybe even 30. You got to be careful on back-to-backs. You got to be careful on continued use, maybe even up for the first month and a half, 2 months of the season before you really feel like, okay, everything's okay, the response is good, the foot's not reacting to a game situation. those are things you can't really know until you do them. And that's why you just have to be careful.
It'll be interesting to see how Fizdale manages Mark and the organization, because I remember young Michael Jordan broke his foot, and when he came back, they were like, no, we have the big picture.
Everything's about the Bulls with you, isn't it? Just you and Michael Jordan, and everything's always the Bulls.
You're
Bulls
such
this,
a hater.
Bulls
You're
that.
such a hater.
I remember when I covered a young Michael Jordan, and I put my arm around him. I told him, "Young fella, you're going to be okay." Come on, man.
Let him have it now, because it's going to be a mess of a season once it tips off.
But my point is, Michael was, extremely difficult. He was very frustrated, and you just talked about it, Chris, in terms of Mark's personality.
Right.
And, it's going to be hard for him to go at that slower pace. But because the big picture is not only having him ready for a playoff push, but, he's got 4 more years on a max contract that they got to think about.
There's no question. Right. And we talked about this, I think a few months ago, kind of in dealing with the injury itself and thinking about like how the thing is going to go. I mean, if you look at the rotation and where they're at a lot of spots, but if you look for the bigs, for example, I mean, you've got Zach, who is going to be 65 games probably. You just at best, he's going to take some time off. He's going to take a few. That's just Zach. He's said that on the record. He wants to, preserve his body. He needs to be sure. I'm sure he'll pick up a few little minor things as the season goes on. You've obviously got Mark in his situation. Brandon Wright, we'll see.
Right.
Jarrell Martin, we'll see. Jermichael Green is what he is, a little limited. And then Deontay Davis. I mean, you're
not counting on anything.
Yeah, that
you
rotation,
might get it, but you're not counting.
Yeah,
on it.
Exactly. So now you've got. I mean, there are questions. The temptation is going to be very strong for Fizdale to push this because there's so many questions behind him, but they can't. Yeah. They can't do that.
Well, and that's going to be an issue at every single position, oddly enough. They either have injury or age questions at all 5 starting positions, and they have depth questions at all 5 positions. And so, Chandler Parsons is coming off a knee injury. Mike Conley has had a tendency to wear down over the course of a season. You got to guard against that.
And now he doesn't even have a veteran backup.
Right. Zach Randolph, as you mentioned, in his mid-30s. Tony Allen is now routinely misses 20-plus games a year, which he probably should, because that makes him better when he comes back. But you have those questions. You have usage questions with all 5 of those guys, and you have big questions about the kind of quality play you're going to get when they're not on the floor.
Well, that gets into the idea of Fizdale being a first-year head coach. I mean, every coach from Hubie Brown all the way up to Lionel Hollins has felt the pressure to win every game. Well, Fizdale comes in as a guy who is renowned for developing talent. So, where's the balance going to be, with that? I mean, that's going to be interesting to see because let's face it, with all the injury history and like you mentioned, wearing down of Mike Conley, he's going to have to give minutes, bite his tongue, pull his hair out to a Baldwin or a Harrison so that he doesn't wear Mike Conley out.
And if he's not comfortable doing that, even if he is comfortable doing that, I am not going to be surprised if they look up at some point, like they have like every single season, and say, we got to go out and get another veteran backup point guard.
Well, assuming Tony Roten's not going to break out, we're just that possibility is out of the
that's
window.
Your answer for everything. Tony Roten.
Tony
Roten.
The vaulted Tony Roten breakout is not going to happen.
Man crush you have on Tony Roten.
I
I don't think he makes the roster. but to Chris's point, I mean, Mario Chalmers is a familiar person to not only Fizdale, but to what he brought to the Grizzlies last year. If he's capable of giving you, anything close to what he did last year, I mean, you got to look at bringing
it'd be a no-brainer.
I've said this repeatedly. People should not rule out a Mario Chalmers return until he signs with another team.
No question. Right. It makes too much sense for a lot of different reasons. And he would instantly come in and upgrade. I mean, you could play him combo. You could do all kinds of things with him. And there's a serious lack of proven quality behind the starters.
And this is a relatively small thing given his age and the injuries coming off of. But a minor consideration is, and it's sort of getting into the weeds of CBA stuff, but if Chalmers re-signs with the Grizzlies without playing for another team in the interim, the Grizzlies actually retain his bird rights, which means next summer they'll have him on a minimum, cap hold or whatever, and they can spend all their cap space and still re-sign him in a way they couldn't with other players. So if they think he is valued not only this season but beyond this seaon, there's an incentive to get him back in the mix.
And you know what? And that really gets into the makeup of the roster because, we talk about Chalmers, as it relates to, what Harrison's role will be, what Baldwin, but those two guys are combo guards. Like It's not like they have this great depth at shooting.
Well, and it's not like if you bring in another point guard that cuts off all paths to playing time for them.
Right.
It's not like the Grizzlies are totally stocked at two guard. Like if you think Wade Baldwin can defend multiple positions on the perimeter and can knock down some shots, you can get him minutes at the two. You can play those smaller backcourts like they did with Conley and Chalmers, like they did with Conley and Bayless. There's avenue for playing time for those guys, even if another veteran point guard comes in.
And that's absolutely what David Fizdale did at Summer League. He worked through that with both Harrison and with Baldwin.
But you saw, and this is so the expectations of what they want to see and what internally they think this season could be. You saw some of the growing pains even at Summer League with those guys playing.
Oh, those guys weren't great at Summer League at all.
No, and Harrison in particular, I think you got questions about Baldwin length and the opportunity to defend. I think there's a quicker path for him to get some minutes. I'm not so sure about Harrison. And all of a sudden, I think Troy Daniels is going to be huge for this reason because at least he has a proven NBA skill that can come in and he can display it, and it's something that they desperately need. But this is where, okay, how much tolerance is David Fizdale or the organization, whoever from on down, how much tolerance are they going to have for these growing pains when you have a rough start and you kind of...
If you believe in Baldwin's upside, and clearly they would not have drafted him where they did if they did not, if you believe in his upside, you have got to... I'm not saying he has to be the 20-minute-a-game backup point guard right out of the gate, but you have got to commit to getting him that time and have a long view of where that's going to take you. Because the guys that he reminds me of, he's a little bit different player, but there's two players he reminds me of a little bit developmentally. He reminds me of Eric Bledsoe. He reminds me of Avery Bradley. These were both guys who were athletic combo guard types, not pure point guards. They both came out early. They both mid-first round draft picks. They were both bad as rookies. Midway through their second season, they started to develop into good rotation players, and now they're quality starters. And it took them a year and a half. I think Baldwin, given his style of play, his athletic ability, and where he has to go in terms of skill development, he is a similar type of player to those guys. And it may be a year and a half before it really clicks.
And you're alluding to something that I think we need to hit on, because it's interesting to hear some colleagues say, well, Fizdale has to at least be as good as Dave. No, I mean, this is a different time for Grizzlies basketball. You've got the core four. You've got major guy coming off an injury. You've got guys aging. And then the back half of that roster are young guys.
It's totally unproven.
And so it may not be as much about wins and losses as about how these guys develop.
Yeah, but hold on. This team is built to. They're the fourth highest
both.
Payroll in the league.
It's a weird place to be because everything you say is true, and at the same time, you just went out and signed Chandler Parsons to a max contract, and Marcus All's 31, and Mike Conley's 28, 29,
this is my point.
Yeah,
because the guys you talked about. I mean, Avery Bradley, when he developed. He developed on a bad team.
They got two max guys.
You can go to look at Rodney Hood. Rodney Hood was horrible for the first 3 months of his career on a bad team.
Two max guys who have never been All-Stars.
J.J. Redick was horrible his first 2 years on a bad team.
Yeah. They've got two max guys who've never been All-Stars.
Welcome to the modern NBA. There's a lot of those running around.
My point is this is why I couched all this with the idea of what are their internal expectations for the season, because if you think this is a 50, 52, 53 win team and you can't tolerate 15 to 20 minutes a night of subpar play
and what are
from a rookie.
To the degree that they care, and they shouldn't care too much. Hopefully Fizdale does what he knows to be right and doesn't care too much.
Right.
What are the fan expectations? Because I think it's interesting when they had the summer they had, great coaching hire. Everyone loves the coaching hire. Biggest free agent signing in franchise history. You got Mike Conley back. Mm-hmm. You had a good draft. Like everything lined up.
Troy Daniels is a nice signing.
Everything. Yeah. I think by acclamation, everyone thinks they had a really good summer.
Oh, absolutely.
And I think fans looked up and said, we're back. Like, we're going to be a top number 3 seed, the 4 seed, whatever in the West. The plus minus numbers come out this week and it's 43.5. That's what Vegas thinks.
I think that's
not what the fan base thinks.
But that's why you got to temper it, because he's got to bring along the Troy Daniels. He's got to bring along
James Ennis.
Ennis took his name out of my mouth. I mean, he's got to bring these guys. He's got to bring along.
To be fair, Ennis is 26,
Harrison and or Baldwin. I mean, isn't that what fans have been whining about for the last 4 or 5 years?
No. I agree with you that there should be some patience on that front, but I do, like Peter said, there's sort of tensions pulling both ways on this.
This is a really tricky thing. I think it also speaks to I mean, you could look at some of the, the more advanced,
what are the expectations of the players, too?
Well, the players clearly expect big things.
Yes. But they're not expecting, Mike Conley's not expecting to win 44 games.
Your Kevin Peltons of the world. Right. There was my guy, I can't remember his name, at Counting Baskets. He's good on nylon calculus. They both individually have 39 win projections. Then you have on the other
Pelton. I mean, I'm a tight brother from way back with Kevin Pelton, but his Shaney system. Every season underrates the Grizzlies. There's something in there.
It does, and there's always been, the Grizzlies have always won their fair share of close games.
Right.
They've always kind of outplayed their Pythagorean stuff on their point differential. So I get all that, but you still have to factor that in because there are fans that think 50, 52, and these things think 39, and Vegas thinks 43.5. There is a huge disparity in what people think. This also gets to my other thing, which is I think Chandler Parsons is vital. Like what they are going to ask him to do as a do-it-all stopgap guy, he will have to defend 3, maybe 4 positions depending on how things go. He may have to play on offense 2 distinct.
I'm going to retroactively put some air quotes around defend when you went up to 3 and 4 positions.
You know what I'm saying, though. He will have to account for.
Listen, we'll be happy if he can defend 1.
He will have to account for different guys in different roles. I agree with you. You know what I mean. But he's going to have to be a part of a defense that does different things.
Right.
He has to play with the starters. One group, and then I think he's going to have to play a prominent role as a part of that backup, as a stretch forward
guy who runs the offense,
playmaker / whatever.
I tell you what,
he's gonna. And if he gets hurt, then that's tough.
You guys are gonna laugh, but I wouldn't rule out Vince in that role, in terms of being on the second unit. Knowing how to play, getting guys in the right spot.
Up-tempo, man. He's up-tempo. He's always moving.
Listen,
we heard so much.
The further he's moved away from that ankle injury, he's gotten better.
Well, we heard so much about the vaunted Vince Carter, Brandon Wright pick and roll in Dallas, and how it was an unstoppable Vince Carter, Brandon Wright pick and roll. Maybe that'll be the bread and butter of the second team, right?
It might be. But if I'm Fizz, if Vince is physically capable of giving you quality minutes, I have him out there just for structure.
He could be the coach's crutch, and there could be a good reason for him to be this year.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
But how much can you rely on, 39-year-old, 40? Where are we at on
Vince?
I think
he's 39.
39-year-old Vince Carter, with
just
injuries.
wrong Tony Roden.
Well, you have to, again, it's either or. It's either you rely on, elderly players or you rely on, fetal players. It's like one of the two. Like these are super young or super old. What are we, this is a tough.
It's
like
meshing
this thing is really going to be tricky.
We're talking about sort of on the court and sort of, effectiveness. But the other thing with Parsons, when you bring him up, this is the first time in a little while that the pecking order may have to change. I'm talking about the chemistry. Like, it's sort of been a slow evolution from Zach Randolph's team to the Marc Gasol, Mike Conley's team.
Sure. Yeah.
But this is going to be the first time since Rudy Gay left that another player comes in who is going to insert himself in the middle. It's not a core 4 anymore. Like Chandler Parsons is there.
Right. I think you're right. It looks like Robert Pera is looking at the big 3.
Right. That's what it's shifting to, from core 4 to big 3.
Yeah.
And if you're Zach Randolph, Tony Allen, I think, these guys are at the stage of their career and the kind of players they've been, I think it'll probably be fine. But that's something to keep an eye on.
Yeah. No doubt about it. Listen, we're talking about guys who are relatively young, and in their prime, whereas like you alluding to, Zach and Tony are, they're
34, 35 years old.
They're moving out.
Well, and this is also just in a related situation with Parsons and what his role is going to be and how things will change. But Fizdale has said, and I think Ron, he may have told you in the discussions about how he wants to play, but he sees Mike Conley as a little more of a alpha. He wants him to kind of have the freedom, particularly early in the shot clock, to initiate and to go after it, and then to fall back on the post play as kind of a last 8 seconds of the shot clock, let's get into something that we know we can handle kind of thing.
Right.
How will that play out? How will that actually manifest itself? Because typically the changes that have been asked from this normal group have not gone over all that well.
Zach Randolph and Marc Gasol actually have crossed the half-court line and into the paint by the time that Conley is initiated.
There's 10 seconds left.
Stuff.
Here comes Mark just kind of moseying on in there. That's what will you actually be able to do that? Will you be able to see Chandler Parsons and Mike Conley pick things up a little bit, and will Zach and Mark go along with that, or will they once again kind of say, boy, this is not the way we should be playing, this is not the basketball, et cetera, et cetera. I'll never forget Mark griping and moaning about, when he scored 38 against I think it was the Knicks, and he was like, well, I mean, we could do this, I guess, but it's not good basketball. What are you talking about?
And Zach infamously said, we're pick and roll team.
Yeah.
This, that, and the other. There's only one answer to all of this. Michael Jordan.
How is Fizdale going to do it? And is Fizdale going to have the clout? Is Fizdale going to have the oomph? Is he going to have the?
Well, I think that's what helps him because let's face it. I mean, like we had the young hot assistant and the 50-year-old
Mark Ivoroni,
who didn't accomplish diddly squat.
Too smart for his own good.
Fizdale has been on championship teams. He's coached the best. I mean, he's got a great reputation of communicating with players. I think that'll be the least of his worries.
Well, and I think he should. There's been so much drama between front office ownership coaches over the years of this team. You got to think that's not going to be the case. Hopefully, at this point, this is the first coach Chris Wallace has handpicked and he is hired. After all the drama with Lionel and with Hollins of Dave Yeager, you got to think that Para and the ownership, in the hierarchy doesn't want any of that anymore. They want to really this is our guy. We're going to bump, we're really going to support this guy finally.
Is it him? Is he the one? Is he making all the calls, or is he going to get some more advanced help from above?
I don't know. I just think that because of the current circumstances of the hire and because of all they went through with Dave and Lionel, there's a lot of impetus for them to really support Fizdale in a strong way.
And to piggyback that, I totally agree with what you're saying because Lionel was never their guy,
right?
And Dave was Levian's guy,
right?
And it turns out that Levian wasn't their guy. And so like
this is the GM's guy, this is the owner's guy, this is everybody's guy.
They're all in on Fizdale, and it would be very disappointing if they didn't support his methods. And you know what? And I think they brought him here in part because they trust.
They want his methods, right?
Yeah. I mean, he's made no bones about it. He's bringing a lot of Miami with him.
But this all goes back to Mark and Mike, right? I mean, they're the ones that they were the infamous dinner meeting guys. They were the ones. They're still the ones that are more or less
and they're your
running the show.
They're your two best players.
Your two best players.
Two best players, and your two. I mean, Parsons' contract may be higher than Mark's, but they're your two prominent.
Yeah. I think that's it. All comes down to
the
those
two
guys.
big contracts. Are your two best players. They're both in their prime, roughly. So I mean, they're the collective straw that's going to stir the drink.
You got to convince them, or they have to convince you, or however this thing's going to work, that this style of play, this method, whatever this method is going to be, is the right one, because as they go, the rest of the locker room goes, and Zach, of course, is all. I
don't know about Mark, but because he was in Spain, but I mean, Conley seems very on board with this hire.
Yeah. Well, here's a question I want to ask you guys before we get out of here. And I agree with you, Peter. Like, Chandler Parsons is going to be huge. I mean,
huge.
I mean, everybody keeps talking about he's the biggest free agent. Like, really? I mean, like, what has he ever done? I mean, I'm not dissing him.
He's a good 15-point a game guy, right?
Well, I'm just saying, don't act like he went and got LeBron.
But he's a 4 assist or 5 assist guy potentially.
And so here's my question: which one of these young guys have to really break out for the to make a difference for this team?
Well, I think you would love for Wade Baldwin to be the answer to that, because if it's not Wade Baldwin, you got to do something at your point guard spot. I don't believe Andrew Harrison's going to be your every night backup point guard. I think you want it to be Wade Baldwin. I think there's a good chance that the other guy that a lot of focus ends up being on is James Ennis. Because if you're going to play smaller ball, one of the things about bringing in Chandler Parsons is using him as a small ball 4 and being able to adjust. Sure. But if you're going to shift him to 4, somebody's got to play 3. And we both think Vince Carter's going to have a role. But I think that there's a door wide open for James Ennis to be the 6th man, essentially, and to play, 2, 3, 4, and to soak up 25 minutes a game. The door is wide open for someone to grab that role. And Vince Carter will have it as a default if no one else grabs it.
Right.
But I think Ennis has the possibility.
Well, I mean, he's a super athletic kid who can get in the paint and make things happen, and he can shoot the corner 3. So I don't disagree with your assessment at all.
And he's young; he can soak up a lot of minutes.
Yeah.
I just think that's true. I think there was at some point though, the bigs. I don't know if you can trust the health of Brandon Wright, Jerome Martin. So I think Deontay Davis, assuming his fasciitis and all that stuff, that whatever he's got going is all squared away, and he's cleared to play.
You mean you don't know? You don't know what he's got going?
What's he got going on?
I don't know. I mean,
it's plantar fasciitis, right?
When do we ever know?
Right. That's my point.
Is it fasciitis? I swear we got something on this, right?
There's rumors out there that, Chris, you're going to be the trainer. Are you the trainer?
I'm not the trainer.
We're not at liberty to discuss this.
Yeah, break news right now. Are you going to be the trainer?
I'm open to negotiation if they would like to bring that.
I think one of those bigs is going to have to come up big, whether it's Jarrell Martin if he's healthy or Deontay Davis. I think there's going to be a role that's going to have to happen for one of those guys. Troy Daniels is going to play a role too because he was. I'm trying to find it. He's first or second last year in the NBA in fourth quarter 3-point shooting percentage. He got shot 50% in the fourth quarter on 100, a lot of attempts. I mean, it was a big number. He can shoot. He was
third after Steph Curry and JJ Redick in points per shot on spot up stuff.
See, there you go. See, that's something they haven't had. They haven't had a guy that has that one thing but does it really, really well.
Yeah, he played 9 minutes in a 7-game playoff series. Yeah, so that tells you a little bit about his limitations.
Chris, that's a little bit of a downer. But don't.
But I tell you what, that speaks to we keep talking about the core 4 plus Parsons, but that speaks to how important the back half of that roster is going to be. Fizdale's going to have to play these kids.
He's got to find 3 or 4 players he can rely on. Yeah.
But look, now this is part of the reason I would assume that Fizdale was hired for this particular role, and why he may have been excited about it. Look at what he got out of that rotation last year in Miami, and that wasn't just him. Obviously, I
think they're tired of not developing players, and they're tired of hearing about how they don't develop players.
Well, but it's true, and they need to do it. They have to.
It is completely true.
It's on them. They have to fix that. So you look at what Josh Richardson. You look at what you had with him. You can see that's a guy that you don't see that from the Grizzlies. This guy that's plucked out of obscurity and plays a significant playoff 20 minutes in a playoff series type role that's out there. I mean, you've got Tyler Johnson. I mean, another guy that really excelled and jumped up the way they were able to integrate so many guys in and Dwayne Wade to get that playoff series that they got out of him and changing his role. So he worked with the veterans really well and had obviously a really tight relationship with those guys and to go along with those younger guys. I mean, if you have a guy that can be tailor-made for this weird, disparate, young, old roster where you're going to have to squeeze some stuff out of some younger guys that you're not sure about, he's a good fit for that purpose.
Yeah. Yep. Well, I'm going to say this. As exciting as you guys think you are, we have 3 lovely exchange students from Denmark here who are bored to death listening to you talk. And so let's leave on this.
Is that true? Are you guys bored to death? Okay, they're not. See, they're not bored to death, Ron.
They're big NBA fans.
They might be bored listening to you. Come on.
So everybody's coming out with their...
I'll say it's hot in here, though. We got 7 people in this tiny little closet. Jeez Louise.
So everybody's coming out with their win totals. Let me get you guys'. What do you say?
Dude, it's September.
It's too early, Ron.
I got a month. I'm not doing this yet. No, I got a month.
That was my answer. I wanted you guys to give me an answer.
I got a process to go through. I haven't started it yet.
Oh, my word.
I'm going to say it's going to be between 72 and 20. Somewhere in there. It's going to settle in.
I think they'll win a fair amount of 82 games.
Will they be more than 50% of those games?
I'll do a win total, but you got to catch me in about a month before I do that.
All right. Well, thanks for listening, guys. And again, this is the first of very many Grizzlies podcasts to come for the 2016-17 season.
Like the Commercial Appeal on Facebook and follow on Twitter at Memphis News. This is the Commercial Appeal.